Well, good morning, church. Good morning. How is everybody doing this morning? Good, all two of you. That's great. I love that. Well, welcome to Mosaic. My name is Rod. I'm one of the pastors here, and we are glad you are with us this morning. I am a planner. I love to plan. In fact, I'm working on our Christmas messages right now. I've got most of my messages through the year working and going. And so what happens when plans fall through? Today you were supposed to hear from our missionaries in Cambodia, but as they were here in the States, his mom got deathly ill, and they had to rush back on Tuesday, redo their flights, and they are back in Cambodia. Please keep them in your prayers. If they were here, you would have heard just an amazing story from this couple. They were taken captive by the Khmer Rouge. They both were in child concentration camps. They ended up escaping, living in the jungle, making their way to Thailand, then to the U.S., found each other, got married, and then decided to go back to Cambodia to become missionaries. One of the interesting things is they are in the stronghold of the Khmer Rouge. So all of the people that they are ministering to are the people that had held them in captivity. Just an amazing story. And we were going to kick off, which we're still kicking off. We are raising money for Sustainable Ministry Center in Cambodia, and we are going to Cambodia this year. I'm leading a trip. I would love it if you would join me November 8th to 18th. You can sign up on the Church Center app. If you've ever wanted to go on a mission trip, please join me as we do that. We're excited. There's limited spots available. I think we have 8 spots in that team. So if you'd like to do that, please sign up or see me for more information. But what do we do today? Right? So I was thinking, how often do life's plans not work the way they're supposed to? Right? Maybe you're here and you had a plan for your life, and God has moved you in a way that it's not working. Maybe you have teachers who have left, or you're changing schools, or you've moved to Las Vegas. Maybe you've had friends that have left or died, or your marriage isn't working. I don't know what it is in your life, but I just have the question, what do we do when plans don't go as ordered? And it made me think about a story in the Bible. So this morning I'm going to do something very different. I feel a little weird because I usually have notes and I have points, and the 3 points, but this morning I'm just going to read out of the Bible. So something a little different. And maybe you're here and you've never read a whole book of the Bible. This morning, I'm going to read a whole book to you. We're going to get through one full story in the Bible. It's the story of Ruth. And so we're just going to read, and I'm going to pause as the Spirit leads me to. I'm going to give you some commentary and some thoughts. So here's to something different. We'll see if you're clapping at the end. So we'll see how this goes. So one of the things I want to tell you about Ruth is a very unique story in the Bible. There's a couple things you need to know. Back in the day where economics was about land, God set this system up because you had to have land to survive. You had to have land to grow fruits and vegetables and those kind of things. You had to have land to be able to sell your wares. So all the economics was set up on a land system. And when it comes to land, what's important is what happens when the husband dies, right? In the family, the system of having a husband who's in charge and works the land. And so what they did was when God set up the 12 tribes and divvied up all the land had to stay in the family's name. Because what would happen is if it didn't, then one of the families could amass all the land and everybody else would be poor and broke. So they had this system that if you were a woman and your husband died, your brother would actually end up bringing you into the family, marrying you, making sure that you would have children, so your name would be taken care of, and then your kids could take care of you. So that's one thing you need to know about the book of Ruth. The second is it is unique in all of the Bible. It's probably one of my favorite books because it's so literary. It's a story. It has heroes and villains and all of these different elements. It has 3 acts. It's dialogue heavy, right? So out of the 85 verses we're going to read today, 65% of them are dialogues. It's a story about 2 women. Doesn't surprise me that it's dialogue heavy, right, guys? I don't mean that's bad. You're going to see they process a lot, right? They keep talking and processing. It's a bit of what it is. It is a unique story, that's for sure. There are 6 prayers in the book of Ruth, and all of them are prayers for somebody else. Nobody prays for themselves. And one of the things I love about it is Jesus is throughout the book of Ruth. From the first verse to the last, it is a story of Jesus. We're going to meet a guy named Boaz in here, and I'll talk a little bit about him. But Charles Spurgeon once said that Jesus is our marvelous Boaz. So let's get started this morning with story time with Rod, and we'll go from there. So Ruth, the book of Ruth. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. Okay, we'll start there. It was the time of Judges. It was a very dark time for Israel. There was this thing called the sin cycle that Israel was in, where God would deliver them. They would be joyful for a while. They would start to forget God. Then they would become oppressed by a people, and then God would raise up a judge and free them. And there was this sin cycle that went on. Maybe you've seen that in your life somewhere, where God frees you from something, and it goes well for a little while, and then after a while, you fall back into the sin. Also, we see that there was a famine in the land, which is very interesting. There was a famine in Bethlehem, which I think that names are very important in the Bible. And so Bethlehem means the house of bread, which is a bit ironic that people were starving in the house of bread. It's like saying, hey, everybody was over at Great Harvest Bread Company and there's nothing to eat. Right? It was a bit of that. So there's this man named Elimelech, which his name means God is our king. And he decides to go to live in Moab. And Moab is no place for the Israelites. It's their enemies. They're worshiping other gods. It's just no place to go. But Elimelech decides that things aren't working well, and so he leaves. Now, one of the interesting things about a man that says, God is my king, we don't know if he asked God or did what, but it seems like he just left. Maybe you've been there, right? Things aren't working out, you get a different job, so you go, well, it can't be that bad there. But here's the thing you have to remember. Wherever you go, that's where your family finds support. Those are the friends your wife's gonna have, guys. Those are the people that your sons and daughters will marry, will be usually from the place you are. We usually find community where you are. And so it's very interesting that a man that is called God is my king fled the land of God for someplace else. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, which means sweetheart. And the name of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, which are translated to death and dying. Kind of like, hey, here's my kids, Ebola and swine flu. I just thought, you'd like to. You get a sense of what is coming. They were from Bethlehem, Judah. They went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Pretty dark for Naomi. First, we get the story that she's married with children and everything's going well, and all of a sudden she is left destitute in a land where she can't care for herself. She has no land in this place. There is nothing for her. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. Right? So she hears that the famine has lifted, things are actually growing back in Bethlehem. She starts to think, well, what is for me here? So I might as well go back to my hometown where I know everybody, all my relatives, my cousins, my family, everybody is there. So they decide to go. With her 2 daughter-in-laws, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. It's about a 50-mile journey. For us, that's no big deal. We drive 50 miles and it takes no big deal. But think about this. Here is a trip with 3 single women. This is very scary. This would have taken them probably 5 to 6 days alone. They would have been very vulnerable. This was not an easy road. This wasn't something that they would have taken lightly. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as he has shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud. And she said to her, "We will go back, but with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." So we see a bit of this idea that when her sons died, then really if she had other sons, they would take those wives on for themselves. She says, "Listen, I'm really old. I'm not having any more kids. And even if I were you going to wait another 20 years until they could be remarried? And are you going to wait until I get a husband? There's nothing going on here that is really good. Go home." And then she says this word, "The Lord's hand was against me." This is very interesting, because this isn't life has treated me unfair. This is God is actively attacking me. God is against me at every turn. Every time I turn around, God is striking me down. Have you ever felt that, church? Maybe we're not willing to admit that yet. We'll get along in the story, but I find it very interesting. I have had these seasons in my life where I'm like, "God, what are you doing?" Every time I turn, it feels like something else is going on. There's another roadblock. It feels like you sent me down this road, like I was heading down this way, and then all of a sudden I'm not supposed to be here, or all of a sudden I'm faced with medical issues. This can't be my life, right? All of these things are going on, and my guess is we have felt this way too, where it feels like not only is God just standing back, but boy, he's actively pushing against us. But Ruth, okay, so at this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. So Orpah's like, "You're probably right. I'm going to go back to my family. I'll go live with my mom and dad. I'll find a new husband. I'll do that." But Ruth, "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." Right? A very interesting response here. I don't have time to get into this one, but the fact that she says, "Go back with your gods," she's worshiping Yahweh. We usually wouldn't say, "Hey, go back and worship those false gods," but she's like, "There's just nothing good for you here." But Ruth makes a reply, and this is really important. Most people would say this is Ruth's conversion. This is where she decides to follow Yahweh. We would say to follow Jesus the rest of her life. Maybe you're in here and you've said words that are akin to this when you said it's time to follow Jesus. But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me ever so severely if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her, right? So whatever it was in this conversation, she's like, okay, Ruth means this. She's following Yahweh. She is now one of us. Okay, let's head back. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" Right? She strolls into town. It's not that big of a town. Everybody sees her. It's been 10 to 15 years now. She probably looks tired, exhausted. Grief has worn in on her, and people are like, is this really Naomi? Right? All the podcasters are talking like, hey, have you seen the new lady in town? This is what's going on. I can't believe this. She's back. It just doesn't seem like it's her. And she says, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. This is just totally interesting. She says, quit calling me sweetheart. Call me bitter old hag, right? Right? Like, I'm bitter, I'm angry, God hasn't dealt well with me. Quit calling me sweetheart. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Right? So interesting. I went away full with the whole family. There was excitement. We were going to a new city. Everything was going to be wonderful, and the wheels fell off. You ever been there? Can't tell you how many people I have talked to who show up in Vegas, and within 6 months they're heading home. Like, man, it was going to be so exciting and so fun, and Vegas chewed us up and spit us out. Right? I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. Once again, it's this active language. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. So here's my first question for you this morning. Who are you when life gets tough? Are you Elimelech? The person, the guy who's just looking for the guy or lady who's looking for the new thing, right? Going to go try out greener pastures? Are you Orpah? Well, I'm just going to go back to what's comfortable, what I know. I'm going to do that. Maybe you're Ruth. I'm going to lean into the church. I'm going to lean into Jesus. I'm going to find a community. And maybe you're like Naomi, who is very honest. Church, so often I have read commentaries that beat Naomi up a little bit, right? Because how can she see that God is actively against her? Doesn't she worship God? Doesn't she do that? I just want to pause. I think that is a little bit off base. I love somebody who is honest with God. God is big enough to take your pain and your hurt. And my guess, there are people in this room who things have happened to you that you didn't deserve, that you didn't ask for, and that no person should have to live through. Be honest with God. If you're angry with God, be angry with God. If you're mourning, mourn with God. If God truly wants a relationship with us, then emotions should be the thing that he wants. He wants honesty. Do you think when you tell God everything's fine and you're broken inside that he doesn't know what's going on? Right? Like he's like, oh, that must be true. No, God knows what you're feeling. He just would love you to be honest. So as we're going through things, let's be a little Ruth, a little Naomi. Let's lean into God. Let's lean into Jesus. But let's be honest about our struggles. When we feel like God's hand is against us, we can at least speak that. There have been times in my life where I've been like, God, what are you doing? I'm angry with you. I remember there was one time I sat in my backyard and I said, I'll show you, God. I'm not going to serve you anymore. Right? Like he was like, oh no, the kingdom's going to fall apart because Rod's going to do something else. But you know what he knew? He knew I just was hurting. He knew I was brokenhearted. He knew within 2 or 3 days I was going to be worshiping again and doing that. I just needed to have an honest conversation with God about what was going on in my life. So let's do that. Chapter 2. So they got into town and as the barley harvest was beginning, so they landed there in March. The first week in March, they ended up being in Bethlehem. So, chapter 2. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man standing in the clan of Elimelech. Okay, right? So in the family name, and his name was Boaz. Boaz, the man of men. He's a good guy. Interesting enough, his mom was a prostitute, right? Maybe you've heard the story of Rahab, who sheltered the spies, and then she lived in Israel after the fall of Jericho. This is his mom. Do you think his life was easy in a Jewish land as an outsider that was now trying to learn customs with a mom who was a prostitute? Probably very difficult life for him. But we're going to see something that I think is so crucial in this because he cares for women like almost nobody else in the Bible. It's why I think he has that imprint of Jesus. Jesus came along and changed our conversation of how he treated women. He lifted them up. He empowered them. And we're going to see that that happens in this story with Boaz. So Boaz is there. He's a small business owner, right? Things seem to be going well with him. He's very blessed. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I favor. Okay, so here's what happens. If you're destitute, God put a plan in place that was a bit like the welfare of the day. They would go out and they would gather the stalks, right? They'd grab the stalks and they'd gather all the grain, and then little bits of grain would fall away. And God told them, listen, here's the law. You're not going to go back and stand there for 10 minutes and pick up all the little pieces. Leave them on the ground. And then anybody who is hurting can go by and pick up those pieces of grain and have something to eat. Now, we think, oh, that'd be great. But here is a barley grain, right there. See that? I know you can. That's what you would find, one of those. And then you'd walk a little while and pick up one of those. And I mean, talk about a day in the heat where hopefully you would get enough to make a little piece of bread, or you'd get enough in your hand. You'd spend all day out there. So she says, hey, we call it gleaning is what it was called. And she said, hey, I'm going to go glean. It's our right, and we don't have any food, so we might as well go out and get something to eat. And Naomi said, go ahead, my daughter. So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, okay, so this word, as it turned out, many of the Bibles say it just so happens. She was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Now, it's very tongue-in-cheek. It just so happens, right? Nobody in Israel believed it just so happened. God controls all things. In fact, when the disciples were looking for a new disciple, what did they do? They cast lots. They rolled dice. We see that as a game of chance. They believe that God's hand is in everything. And so, I love how the story's like, okay, so you can go out and glean. You can go out and get some food. She took one right, two lefts. She went straight ahead through the next thing. And just so happens, she ends up in Boaz's field. Right? It's like there's nothing here. God's hand is here. When we don't see and when plans change, God has a hand in it. Right? I had to tell myself this week so often, maybe this is what the church needs to hear is this story and not what we had planned. Because what we had planned we think is always so much better. But God is in control. God is in control of all things. Okay, just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvest. And I love this. This is going to sound familiar to you. The Lord be with you. Right? It's the priestly blessing I end every service with. And then the next one, I love how they say, the Lord bless you, they answered. I'm sure this is how you guys greet your bosses at work. He comes to you and says, the Lord bless you and keep you. And you're like, and also with you, right? It's like this back and forth. Everybody's just happy. It kind of tells you as he's using the priestly blessing and they are back to him that this is really a good guy. Boaz asked the overseer of the harvester, who does that young woman belong to? Very straightforward. You don't get any flexion. He goes, hey, who's that woman over there, right? He's like, hey, how you doing, right? Like, it's like, dude, just saying that's what's going on here. The overseer replied, she is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She came into the field and has remained here from the morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. Right? This is the woman everybody's been talking about, Boaz. She's the one that came back with Naomi, and she's a hard worker. She hasn't let up. She's been working behind our workers all day. So then Boaz says to Ruth, my daughter. You just think it's my daughter, but he's like, hello, it's good to meet you. Listen to me, don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the fields where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and wherever you go thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. This is so amazing. He is just pouring out grace and love on her. They would have had to bring all this water there for the workers. The well could have been miles away. And if she didn't have anything, every time she got thirsty, she'd have to walk a mile for water. He says, no, you stay here with me. And think about this. A single woman back in the day is walking behind the men. There's a few things those men know. This is not a protected woman. There is no husband or brothers that are going to come and get me. I can do whatever I want. And so it was very dangerous to go out and glean. A lot of women got taken advantage of and things happened. But he says, you stay in my field and I will protect you. At this, she bows down her face to the ground. She asks him, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you noticed me, a foreigner? Boaz replied, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and your mother and your homeland and you came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. So he prays over her. I hope God blesses you. And then you know what he does? He goes and makes sure that she's blessed. How often do we pray and then maybe it's up to us to go fulfill those prayers? So often we think, well, I prayed, I did my part, but sometimes God's like, I want you to pray, and then I want you to go make that happen. Maybe you're praying, I pray that my family would know Jesus, and God's like, that's a great prayer. Now go do it. I pray that Mosaic would be equipped to reach people in Las Vegas, and God's like, that's a great prayer. Now go give. Right? So often we want to do one or the other. We want to be the doers or the prayers, but I love here how he prays and then watch this. He makes sure that his prayer is going to come true. May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord, she said. You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have standing as one of your servants. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, come over here, have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar. He even feeds her. When she sat down with the harvester, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. As she got up to glean, Boaz gave orders to his men. Let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Right? So they were supposed to stay way back, not up with the sheaves where all the harvesting was going, because maybe you drop a big load and they need to pick it up. You were supposed to be way back. But he says, hey, listen, let her get right behind you. Even pull out some stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, and don't rebuke her. It's amazing. So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered. Now, here's what I love about that. He goes to the men and he says, here's what you're going to do. You're going to take care of her and you're not going to touch her. Because I know where all the abandoned fields are and I have a shovel, right? He's like, listen, I'll take care of you. I'm only kidding. But you get the point. Here's my point I want to make right here. I think it's so imperative to everybody in this room that men, you're talking to young men. We're teaching them how to grow up. We're teaching them how to follow Jesus. We're teaching them how to treat women well. Women, I think it's imperative that you take the women under, young ladies under your wing, and you're talking to them and caring for them and teaching them how to grow up. I think that's on us, and I love how Boaz does that. He makes sure he goes, he gathers the guys, and he says, this is what you're going to do. And my guess is they were like, you're crazy. Right? This is more than we would ever give to a foreign woman. And he's like, just watch what I do. Just watch what I do. So she gathered it up, and it amounted to an ephah. How crazy is that? An ephah. Can you believe it? I mean, that is amazing. And you're all here going, dude, what are you talking about? Okay. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Because I think there's no better way for you to understand this than to show you. So I've got barley up here. This is what you would spend. I mean, this would have been a really, really good day. It's about 1 cup. They think you could have, and look at all the little grains. You spend a whole day, 8 to 10 to 12 hours, and this is what you get. This is all you get, and every day you have to go and get it again, right? About 1 cup. That's about what it amounts to. And listen, this is what she was owed under the law. Under the law, God had set it up. This is what she was owed. But Boaz, he changed the equation. So I want you to think about this. Actually, I'll show you what it is, and then I'll talk through it. But this is amazing. So here's an ephah. Here's what she got. And I wonder if you have ever been there. Instead of what you deserve, you find God's grace, right? You find God's grace, and it just overpours, and it keeps pouring out, and you're like, man, that's amazing. Nope, we're still going. Because God is so amazing. This is about what she would have got right here. Just think about that, the grace and love of God pouring out on her. How amazing is that, right? That is so cool. Think about it this way. There's a guy who owns a restaurant, right, in downtown. He's on the Strip. He owns the hottest restaurant in town in Vegas. He's taking out the trash one night. He sees a lady. She's out there. She's trying to pick up aluminum cans just to get enough to eat. And he goes and he talks to her, and he's like, hey, I recognize you. You come to Mosaic. You're the new person. You gave your life to Christ. You're in a community group. Here's what I'm going to do for you. Why don't you come inside right now, put on this apron. See these tables over here? These guys are the big, they're the big deal. They're the big money spenders. I want you to wait on them. And she gets done with the night, and the tip she gets is about $1,000. That's about what this equates to. This would have been 1 to 2 weeks for a wealthy person would have gotten that much, right? And then we're going to see in a minute that he says, you stay the whole harvest season. So when you think about that, if she would have gotten this much every day, it would have been enough to take care of her and Naomi for the whole year. He was making sure she was cared for. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she had eaten enough. Her mother-in-law asked her, where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one place she had been at work. The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz. The Lord bless him, Naomi said to his daughter-in-law. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. She added, that man is our close relative. He is one of the guardian redeemers. Then Ruth the Moabite said, he even said to me, stay with my workers until they finish harvesting all the grain. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it will be good for you, my daughter, to go with the women who work for him, because in someone else's field you might be harmed. So Ruth stayed close to the women of Boaz to glean until the barley and wheat harvest had finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Chapter 3. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, my daughter, I must find a home for you will be well provided for. Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight they will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note a place where he is lying. Then go uncover his feet, lie down, and he will tell you what to do. Horrible advice. Okay. She's like, listen, the harvest is over, so they're at the winnowing where they bring all their harvest, and they have these big grains. They're getting ready to sell it, and they're gonna be eating a lot, having way too much wine, and then they're gonna lay down and go to sleep. And they lay on their barley so nobody can steal it, right? And she says, listen, get all dressed up, put on your best perfume, go out, get a mani-pedi, look as best as you can, and then go lay down at his feet and say, I'll do whatever you would like me to. Okay, just because she gives this advice, this is not what we give advice for our young women. This is not what I would tell my daughter to do. She says, I will do whatever you say. She went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Now, there would have only been one kind of woman that would have been down at the threshing floor. They would have probably been prostitutes. He says, "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are my guardian redeemer of our family." I love this next reply. "The Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor, and now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you as all you ask." I love this. So he says, lie here until morning. He is saying, listen, you're way out of my league. You're not going after the younger men who you could get or the rich men. You're here, and I see that. You just stay here till morning, and we're going to take care of this. I love that he doesn't push her away. He's afraid that maybe traveling back into the city might not be safe. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone else could recognize. And he said, "No one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor." He also said, "Bring me that shawl you are wearing and hold it out." And when he did, he poured into 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Doesn't let her go empty-handed. Said, "Here you go, take this, but you need to go home now because I want to keep your reputation intact." When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "How did it go, my daughter?" Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her, and he added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Young men, did you hear that? You're out on a date with a girl, you like her. "Hey, I'll take a piece of chocolate cake to go," and then you give it to her and go, "Take this home to your mom. I know she likes chocolate." Right? Smooth man, good man, good man. I'm telling you, you got to date your mother-in-law too. I'm just saying, that's the way it works. And then Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens," right? She says, listen, he's going to make something happen. He's not going to let this go. Chapter 4. Oh, we're going to be close. We'll get through it. Meanwhile, Boaz went out up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. They don't even mention this guy's name. In Ruth, everybody's a name except for what's-his-face, right? This is what's-his-face. So when what's-his-face comes around, he's in the line before Boaz. And so here's what Boaz does. He stands at the gates. And this is what used to happen as all the people would be coming out to work. They would grab elders of the community, people that were wise, people that they knew, and so he grabs 10 elders and he sits them down because he needs to have a conversation with what's-his-face. And so he does. He sits them all down. And he says, "Naomi has come back from Moab and is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders, my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know, for no one has the right to do it except you, and I'm the next in the line." And then he says, what's-his-face goes, "Sure, I'll do it. I'll redeem it." And then the tension builds, right? This is the part of the rom-com where you're like, are they going to get together? We're not really sure. Then Boaz says, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." Okay, so I love how Boaz, he doesn't manipulate, he doesn't lie, but he surely highlights the bad parts of the deal. Well, you can have the land, but you're going to have to marry Ruth. And then she's going to have kids, and that's going to divide your estate, and your kids are not going to get nearly as much because maybe she's going to have a lot of kids. And he's like, okay, no, I don't want to do it. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it yourself." And then there's this whole piece in here I'm going to skip about removing sandals. They used to do that. I don't know why, but it was, legal tender. So he removes his sandals. He gives it to them. Then Boaz announced to the elders, all the people, "Today you are my witnesses. I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite. Mahlon's widow as my wife in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are my witnesses." Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses." And I love it's another prayer over them. "May the Lord make this woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah," right? "Who together built up the family of Israel," right? Another great prayer. "May they give you offspring." They go on, they pray over him. And then we read this. "So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he made love to her. The Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son." The woman said to Naomi, "Praise be the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous through all Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons has given birth." Such a beautiful story. I know it's Ruth, but it's also this story of Naomi who leaves full, becomes empty through this traveling. And then it closes with this beautiful picture. "Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, 'Naomi has a son,' and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David," right? Here we are, this man who looks like Jesus, right? He poured out barley. Did you see Jesus? There's a family resemblance. He came and he saw Ruth and he redeems her. Do you see the family's resemblance? Even they shared a meal. What was the meal? Communion. They shared bread and wine. And I love how Jesus is redeeming us the same way, like I said, Jesus is our fabulous Boaz. That is the book of Ruth. So let's continue to worship Jesus together today. I'm going to leave the barley out here. I think it's just a great visual as maybe you are sitting here and life isn't going the way you would like it. Maybe something has interrupted your life and you're not sure. Maybe you feel like God's hand is upon me. Whatever it is, maybe you just feel blessed like Ruth today. I'm not sure what it is, but I know this, that Jesus sees you. That it's not that it just so happened, that God wants to redeem you. And so let's stand together as we worship the Lord Jesus together. Would you stand? Let me pray.